My name is Elizabeth, and the day my sister got married was the day I truly saw myself for the first time. The day I realized how invisible I had become to the very people who should have cherished me most. I was seated behind a pillar at my sister's wedding. The seats were all filled, yet no one came over to greet me. Everyone else had their groups, laughing, chatting, and being seen, while I sat there, out of sight, out of mind. It felt like being erased from the family's memory. You ever been in a place where you're supposed to be seen, but you feel like you're invisible? That's how I felt. I had been invited, yes, but only out of obligation. My seat was at the very back, tucked behind a decorative pillar. I wasn't supposed to be visible. I wasn't supposed to matter. Everyone else in the front row was dressed to the nines, excited, beaming with joy. Then there was me, in the back, with nothing but the lingering ache of being secondary. Victoria, my older sister, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our mother's eyes, was getting married to Gregory, a man I had never even heard her mention before. Her invitation had arrived in the mail 3 months earlier, and I thought it would be a chance to reconnect. But as I held that embossed card, all I could think of was the last family dinner we had 6 months ago. Thanksgiving. I had spent 2 days perfecting a pumpkin cheesecake with spiced cream cheese and a ginger snap crust that looked like a masterpiece. But when I placed it on the buffet table, Victoria's store-bought pie was praised, and my dessert was relegated to the far corner. My mother barely glanced at it. The message was clear: no matter what I did, would always fall short. I was never enough. And here I was, again, at her wedding, sitting in the back. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. The ceremony began, and I tried to focus on the vows, on the beautiful bride I had once shared everything with. But the only thing I could think about was how the seats were arranged. Victoria's friends, work colleagues, and even our distant cousin Jessica were all front and center, while I was hidden behind a pillar, out of view. It wasn't about the wedding, it was about the years of feeling like I was nothing but a second thought in my own family. Then, a voice interrupted my thoughts. A stranger sat beside me, his presence unmistakable. He looked me over, as if studying me, before saying in a calm but firm voice, "Follow my lead. Pretend you're my date." My heart skipped a beat. Was he talking to me? My first instinct was to say no, to stay in my corner and continue wallowing in the humiliation of it all. But something in his eyes, something in his confident demeanor, made me pause. He didn't see me as invisible. He didn't see the sister who had been sidelined. He saw me. I couldn't help but feel a rush of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Could this really be happening? Could someone actually acknowledge me in this sea of perfection? Before I could respond, he stood up, offering me his hand. "Trust me," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You don't have to sit in the back. You belong up here." Something inside me cracked. For the first time in years, I had a choice. I wasn't stuck. I didn't have to stay hidden. I didn't have to wait for someone else's approval. I could stand up for myself. I could be seen. I took his hand. The next moments felt surreal. I followed him through the crowd, my heart pounding in my chest. I had never imagined I would be walking toward the front, toward the seats reserved for the family, but there I was, heading to a table closer to the VIPs. I could feel the eyes on us, curious, judgmental even. But I didn't care anymore. Not as much as I had before. As we reached the table, I glanced around and saw the faces of people I didn't know. They smiled at me, polite but curious, wondering who I was, why I was here. Julian, the stranger who had become my unexpected ally, sat down beside me confidently. He didn't care that people were staring. He didn't care that I didn't belong. He turned to me and said, "This is what you deserve. Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are." And in that moment, something inside me clicked. It wasn't about the wedding, or my sister, or my family's expectations. It was about me. It was about finally standing up for myself, about rejecting the role I had been forced to play for so long. I didn't have to sit in the back anymore. I didn't have to hide. For the first time that day, I realized something. I was no longer invisible. Not to Julian, not to the world. And certainly not to myself. Have you ever been made to feel invisible, like you didn't matter, no matter how hard you tried? Imagine, just for a second, reclaiming your seat at the table. What if you didn't have to wait for someone else to make you visible? What if you could just walk into the room and be seen? Don't forget to subscribe and like this video. After that moment with Julian, everything changed. I was no longer the girl sitting behind the pillar, ignored and forgotten. I had made my choice. I wasn't going to be invisible anymore. But with that decision came a bitter realization. I was never going to be enough for my family. The night carried on, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was at the wedding for all the wrong reasons. My sister, Victoria, had built this perfect world around herself, and I was just a distant memory, a reminder of everything she had left behind to chase success. To chase her perfect life. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. He wasn't just talking about this wedding, about the way my family had treated me. He was talking about my whole life. I had spent so many years pretending, trying to please people who would never appreciate me. I had buried my dreams, my talent, my worth, all for the sake of their approval. And I was done. Something inside me snapped. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I felt powerful. As the night went on, I found myself standing in front of the dessert table, my hands trembling as I arranged the pastries. This was my space, my time to shine. It wasn't about pleasing them anymore. It was about me, about showing the world who I was and what I could do. Julian's presence beside me was a reminder of everything I had been denied. He watched me carefully, and I could tell he saw it, too. I wasn't just a pastry chef anymore. I wasn't just the sister who didn't matter. I was someone with a talent that could make the world take notice. Then, it happened. Victoria walked by the dessert table, her gaze falling on the display I had meticulously crafted. She stopped, her expression unreadable. It was as though she was seeing me for the first time, not as her sister, not as someone she could ignore, but as someone who had something to offer. But before she could say anything, her gaze shifted to the guests around her, to the people who mattered to her. She smiled, nodded, and walked away without a second glance. That's when I realized something profound. I didn't need her approval. I had been searching for it my whole life, but now, I saw that it wasn't going to come. Not in the way I wanted. Not in the way I deserved. And that realization hit me harder than anything I had ever felt before. I looked at Julian, who had been silently watching the entire scene unfold. His eyes were filled with understanding. He didn't need me to explain. He knew. "You're worth more than this," he said softly, his voice low but firm. "They don't deserve to define you." And in that moment, I made a decision. I was going to show Victoria that I didn't need her. I didn't need my mother's validation. I didn't need anyone who had ever made me feel less than I was. I was going to take what was mine, not through revenge or cruelty, but through my own strength. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to understand that they couldn't push me aside anymore. I wanted them to know that I was more than just a background character in their perfect world. I was going to rewrite the story. But how? The answer came that night, after the wedding, in the quiet of my hotel room. I opened my phone and saw a text message from Julian. It was simple. "Are you ready to make them notice you?" I smiled to myself. I knew exactly what he meant. This wasn't just about proving I mattered. It was about showing them, once and for all, that they could no longer ignore me. I typed back, "Yes, I'm ready." But little did I know, the plan Julian had in mind would be more than just a wake-up call to my family. It would shake their perfect world to its core. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Would you fight back, or would you let them win? Tell me in the comments. Like this video if you've ever been overlooked or dismissed. Share your story below, and don't forget to subscribe for more moments of strength, triumph, and yes, revenge that I didn't expect it to feel this way. I had spent years trying to prove myself, trying to earn a seat at the table. Now, with the plan Julian had suggested, I was about to take control in a way I hadn't even imagined. But the question was, would I regret it? The weeks after the wedding passed in a blur. I spent my days at the bakery, my mind preoccupied with what Julian had proposed. Every time I thought about it, a strange mix of excitement and dread would settle in my chest. Julian wanted to help me make my family see me, to stop hiding in the shadows. But his plan wasn't just about me standing out at the next family gathering. It was about creating a situation so powerful, so undeniable, that it would force them to notice me, to respect me. As I continued working, Julian texted me daily. We talked about everything, business, life, and even my family, but never about his plan. His silence felt like he was waiting for the perfect moment, the moment when the stakes would be high enough to make a real impact. One night, after a particularly stressful day at the bakery, Julian called. His voice was low, almost conspiratorial. "Elizabeth, it's time." My heart skipped a beat. I had known this day would come, but hearing him say it made the reality sink in. "You sure?" I asked, my voice trembling despite myself. "I'm sure," he replied, his confidence never wavering. "This will force them to see you. It's the only way." I couldn't shake the feeling that something would go wrong, that this could backfire in ways I hadn't thought through. But as I thought about my family, about how they had treated me my whole life, I realized I didn't care anymore. They had made me feel like I didn't matter. Now, I would show them just how wrong they were. The next week, I received an invitation to another family gathering. My mother was hosting a brunch for her close friends, and, of course, she had invited me. This time, I didn't hesitate. I knew exactly what I was going to do. Julian had made sure everything was in place. He'd already dropped hints in the right circles. He knew how much power his company had in certain sectors, including my family's world. The leverage was there. All I had to do was show up. I spent the morning getting ready, picking out an outfit that made me feel both confident and powerful. I wore a sleek black dress that hugged my curves just right, paired with subtle gold accessories that spoke of elegance without being too flashy. I didn't want to seem like I was trying too hard, I just wanted to look like I belonged. When I arrived at my mother's house, I immediately felt the difference in the air. The usual chilly reception was gone. People greeted me with forced smiles, almost as if they didn't know what to expect from me. My mother, of course, was the first to approach. "You look nice," she said, her smile tight. But there was something in her eyes, recognition. She had no idea how much my life had changed since the wedding. "Thank you, Mother," I replied, my tone deliberately calm. "I've been keeping busy." Before she could say anything else, Julian walked in. His presence was unmistakable. He was dressed in a tailored suit, looking every bit the powerful businessman that he was. But when he stepped into the room, it wasn't just his appearance that made heads turn. It was the way he moved through the crowd, confident, magnetic, and completely at ease in a room full of people who would normally look right past me. My family had always prized status, connections, and appearances. Now, Julian had something they couldn't ignore. He was the kind of man they admired. As soon as he entered the room, I saw my mother's eyes flicker with recognition. She tried to mask it, but it was too late. The game had changed. Everyone was watching us. Julian made a beeline for me, placing a hand gently on my back as he spoke to the guests around us. "Elizabeth, this is such a lovely gathering. Thank you for inviting us," he said, his voice rich with sincerity, but his words carefully chosen. I smiled, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just about Julian and me. This was about me finally being seen. I was no longer the sister in the background, hiding behind a pillar. I was no longer the invisible one in my family. I was someone worth noticing. Throughout the brunch, I could feel the shift. Conversations shifted when people spoke to me. My mother's friends, who had once dismissed me as a mere pastry chef, now asked questions about my work. They were genuinely interested in what I had to say. Even my mother, who had always kept me at arm's length, started introducing me to people with a level of respect I had never seen before. But it wasn't just about the conversation. It was about what hadn't happened. No one mentioned my sister Victoria. No one mentioned the wedding. No one made me feel like I was just the afterthought. I saw my sister later in the day, standing across the room with Gregory. Her eyes locked with mine for a brief second, and there was something in her gaze that made me pause. There was no judgment. There was no dismissiveness. Instead, I saw something new, a flicker of respect. It was fleeting, but it was there. And in that moment, I realized something. This was never just about getting back at my family. This was about proving to myself that I was worth being seen, and that no one, no matter how much they tried to erase me, could ever take that away again. Julian, I whispered as we walked out together, the evening air cool against my skin. This is just the beginning, isn't it? He looked at me, a glint of pride in his eyes. You're finally taking your place, Elizabeth. And nothing, will make you invisible again. That night, I slept with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. But I knew, deep down, this was only the start. There was more to come. The consequences for those who had treated me as less than were only just beginning to unfold. What would you do if you had the chance to make your family finally see you? To make them realize your worth? Let me know in the comments. Like this video if you've ever felt like you didn't belong, and subscribe to see how this story unfolds. It's strange how much power a single moment can hold over your life. One decision. One move. I thought I had been in control before, but it wasn't until that brunch with Julian that I realized how much I had been playing their game. How much I had been willing to settle for the scraps of attention they threw my way. But no more. I woke up the next morning feeling different. The person I had been hiding from the world, the quiet sister, the one who always stayed in the background, was gone. She had been replaced by someone who knew her worth. Someone who was done asking for validation. Yet, as much as I felt empowered, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was stepping into dangerous territory. When you challenge the status quo, when you demand the respect that's long been denied, you don't just change how people see you. You change the way they respond to you. You become a threat. And for the first time, I could feel the ripple effect of that shift in the air. A week passed before I got a call from my mother. The tone in her voice was different this time, softer, more calculated. It was like she was trying to smooth over something, trying to pull me back into the fold. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. She had seen the change in me. Elizabeth, she said, her voice hesitant. We need to talk. The way she said it made my stomach churn. She'd never called me before to have a real conversation about anything. Not in the way people talk to someone they care about. It was always about what I could do for her, or how I could fit into her image of the perfect daughter. But this time, she was the one reaching out. You're right, she continued, her words slow and deliberate. The wedding seating, that was a mistake. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure I was ready to hear her try to explain away the years of neglect, the way I'd been discarded for Victoria's sake. But I was curious. Curious about how far she would go to pretend she hadn't spent my entire life making me feel small. I was under a lot of pressure, Elizabeth, she said. You know how important it was for me to make everything perfect. For the family to look good. For a moment, I almost let her words slide. I almost let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, she had finally realized the toll her actions had taken. But then, a thought hit me. Was she apologizing because she genuinely felt remorse? Or was she apologizing because she could sense the power I was starting to wield? I leaned into the silence on the other end of the line, letting her stew in the awkwardness. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady, calculated. You always said you wanted me to have a successful life, to make something of myself. But when I finally do that, when I finally step into who I am, you push me to the back. The back of your wedding, the back of your life. You didn't want me to succeed unless it fit neatly into your narrative. There was a pause. She didn't speak. I could almost hear her scrambling for the words to smooth things over. You're right, she finally said, her voice quieter. "I've been hard on you. But I never wanted you to feel like you didn't matter. I've just always wanted the best for you. Always." I knew then that she was still talking to me like I was a child, like I was someone she could still manipulate with words. But something had shifted. I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the daughter who would sit quietly and accept their crumbs. "Maybe it's not about what you want from me, Mom," I said, my voice stronger now. "Maybe it's about me deciding what I want for myself. And I don't need your approval to do that anymore." The conversation ended quickly after that. She tried to apologize again, tried to pull me back into her world, but I wasn't having it. Not anymore. That night, Julian called. I told him about the conversation, about my mother's attempt at patching things up. "You're playing a dangerous game, you know," he said, his voice low. "Revenge isn't just about getting back at people. It's about changing the way they see you. And sometimes, that comes at a cost." I thought about his words carefully. The cost of all of this, the manipulation, the secrecy, the game we were playing, could it hurt me in the end? Or was this the only way to finally make my family see me for who I was? "I don't want to hurt anyone, Julian," I said quietly. "I just want them to know I'm not invisible anymore. I want them to know that I matter. That I've always mattered." There was a long silence on the other end, before he finally spoke. "You're going to have to fight for that, Elizabeth. And sometimes, you might not like how it feels." I didn't respond right away. Julian was right. What I was doing, what I had already started, wasn't just about standing up for myself. It was about making them pay attention, whether they liked it or not. And in that moment, I realized something else. There was no going back. I had stepped into a world where everything was about perception, about power, about control. And the more I played this game, the more I realized that this wasn't just about me getting revenge. This was about taking what I had always been denied. The next family gathering would be different. My mother and sister would see me in a way they never had before. Not as the daughter who was always in the background, the sister who never quite fit in. They would see me as someone they couldn't ignore anymore. But as the days passed, I started to wonder, what if they never acknowledged me for the person I had become? What if, no matter what I did, they continued to treat me like I was invisible? Would I ever be satisfied with just this? Would revenge really be enough? What would you do if you were me? Would you take back your power, even if it meant risking everything? If you've ever had to fight for your place, drop a comment and share your story. Like this video if you've ever been overlooked or pushed aside, and subscribe for more raw stories of taking back what's rightfully yours. I thought I knew what I was getting myself into. I thought this was just about standing up for myself, about reclaiming my place in a world where I had been pushed aside. But as the days passed and I put the plan into motion, I started to feel the weight of it. The reality of what I was doing settled in, and with it, a creeping doubt that gnawed at the edges of my resolve. Julian had given me a sense of purpose I hadn't realized I needed. But purpose comes with a cost. We spent the next few weeks preparing, subtly manipulating the circumstances, weaving a story that would force my family to take notice. Every move was calculated, every word carefully chosen. The game wasn't just about revenge, it was about control. I had to make them see me, really see me. No more hidden corners. No more invisible daughter. They had no idea what was coming. The next family event was my mother's annual summer barbecue. She hosted it at her pristine suburban home every year, a gathering full of her friends, colleagues, and the kind of people who were always in the background of her life. I had never truly been a part of that world, always feeling like I was just a guest, someone who didn't belong in the inner circle. But this time, it was going to be different. I showed up wearing a simple but elegant dress, a deep emerald green that complemented my skin perfectly. Julian was by my side, as planned, but this time, it wasn't just about showing up as his date. This time, it was about making a statement. I wasn't the sister who didn't matter. I wasn't the daughter who had been relegated to the shadows. I was Elizabeth, and I was going to make them notice. As soon as we entered the backyard, the eyes of the guests were on us. Julian's presence was magnetic. He was confident, sharp, and charismatic. People were drawn to him, to the stories he told, to the way he made everyone feel like they mattered. But then, their gaze shifted. To me. I wasn't just with him anymore. I wasn't the invisible sister who stood in the corner. I was someone. And it was working. My mother's friends who had once barely acknowledged me now engaged in conversation with me, asking questions about my work. For the first time in years, they were listening. But my mother? She was watching me closely, her eyes flickering between Julian and me with a mixture of confusion and something darker. She knew something had changed. And when she caught me across the room, our eyes met, and for the first time, I saw the tension in her face. She couldn't dismiss me anymore. I approached her, pretending to enjoy the quiet chatter around us, but the tension between us felt palpable. "Elizabeth," she said, her voice tight. "You're doing quite well for yourself, I see." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a compliment. It was an observation, a cold acknowledgement that she could no longer pretend I didn't matter. "Thank you, Mother," I replied, my voice steady. "I've been working hard." She nodded, her lips pressed together in that familiar tight smile. But there was something else in her eyes, something that hinted at her discomfort. She was threatened. Her discomfort only made me feel stronger. She had always been the one with the power, the one who controlled the narrative of our family. But now, as I stood there, with Julian at my side, I realized I was the one in control. And it felt damn good. But then, things took a turn. As the barbecue progressed, the conversation shifted to Gregory. My sister's husband. The perfect man for her. The man who had never once acknowledged the strain their relationship had caused me. Victoria had kept him in the spotlight, had kept him at the center of every conversation, and had made sure that I was pushed out of the picture. But today, he was a part of my plan. Julian had made a few calls, subtly planting the idea in the right circles that Gregory's company, Bennett Health Solutions, was facing a major project proposal involving sustainability that Julian's firm was working on. The whispers started to circulate, and soon enough, the focus shifted to the business side of things. People started asking questions about Gregory's involvement in the project, about his plans for the future, about how he was navigating the shifting landscape of the pharmaceutical industry. I watched as my sister tried to play the role of the perfect wife, her smile faltering every time someone mentioned Gregory's business. She couldn't keep up the charade. She couldn't control the narrative anymore. But what did that mean for me? What was I really hoping for? I wanted to prove that I could make my own path. I wanted to show them that I wasn't just the invisible sister who had been hiding behind the curtain for so long. I was someone who could create change, who could make her mark, without needing their approval. And then came the moment I'd been waiting for. At the height of the barbecue, as the conversation swirled around us, I found myself standing in front of Gregory. The man who had never taken the time to get to know me, the man who had never once thought to ask about my life, about my work. He looked at me, and I could see it in his eyes. He had finally noticed me. "You've been doing quite well, Elizabeth," he said, his voice a little stiff, a little unsure. "I heard about the Bennett event. Your desserts were impressive." Impressive. That was all he had to say. But it was enough. In that moment, I knew that the game was changing. For once, I wasn't the invisible one. I wasn't the woman stuck in the background. I wasn't the sister who had to hide behind the pillar. I was Elizabeth. And for the first time, I wasn't fighting for a seat at the table. I was the one who had created the table. But this didn't stop here. The story wasn't over. I still had more to prove, more to accomplish. Would they ever truly see me for who I was? Would my mother and sister finally acknowledge the person I had become? Or was this just the beginning of a battle that would leave scars too deep to heal? You ever had a moment where you realized everything you thought you knew about yourself was a lie? Where the world you'd been fighting to fit into finally pushed back? What would you do if you were in my shoes, forced to challenge the family you've known your whole life? Like this video if you've ever had to fight for your place, or if you've ever been dismissed without a second thought. Drop a comment and let me know what you would have done in my shoes, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of strength, power, and yes, revenge. The day after the barbecue, I woke up with the kind of clarity that only comes after a storm. The storm inside me had been brewing for years, the frustration, the longing, the anger, and finally, it had broken free. But I wasn't sure how much damage had been done, not yet. Everything had shifted, but I wasn't done yet. The tension from that afternoon still lingered in my mind. My mother's forced politeness. Gregory's uncomfortable compliments. Victoria's thinly veiled contempt. They all had one thing in common: they saw me now. But that didn't mean they liked what they saw. And that was the real prize, wasn't it? To be seen for the first time in my life, even if they didn't want to admit it. I had disrupted their perfect little world, and that was exactly the point. A few days later, Julian called. "Elizabeth, I've got news." His voice sounded more serious than usual. My heart raced. "What's going on?" "I've been having conversations with a few key people," he started, his words slow, calculated. "The sustainability proposal we've been pushing is going to be a huge deal. And Gregory's company is a part of it. But I've got a way to make sure they can't ignore you anymore." I wasn't sure where this was going, but my curiosity piqued. "Go on." Julian paused, and when he spoke again, it was clear he had something big in mind. "I'm setting up a meeting with Bennett Health's executive team. We're discussing the future of their company, the long-term direction, and the partnerships they need to consider. I'm thinking, you should be there." I sat up straighter, the weight of his words settling over me. "Me? At a meeting with them?" He chuckled softly, the sound making my pulse quicken. "You've got the talent, Elizabeth. They don't know it yet, but they will. If we want to make this stick, it's time for you to stop hiding." I had thought about it, dreamed of it, but now, hearing him suggest it out loud, I wasn't sure I was ready. The last thing I wanted was to step into their world again, uninvited, without the shield of their approval. But Julian was right. The only way I could force them to see me was to step into the very space where they had always held the power. I took a deep breath. I'm in. The following week, I found myself in the heart of the corporate world, sitting across from Gregory and several other top executives at Bennett Health Solutions. I had prepared for this moment, rehearsed what I would say, and dressed carefully in a sharp black suit that screamed professionalism. But inside, I was shaking. This wasn't just about the meeting, it was about the message. This was about showing them that I wasn't some pastry chef stuck in the back of the family photo. I was someone they needed to reckon with. As the meeting began, I could see the executives glancing at each other, their faces barely masking their surprise when they saw me sitting at the table. They had expected Julian, of course. He was the consultant, the expert. But me? The sister? The one they had never taken seriously? Gregory's gaze landed on me for just a second longer than was comfortable, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of doubt. But then, I reminded myself, this is the moment. Julian kicked things off with his usual charm, easing into the discussions about the proposal. He spoke of sustainability, of impact, of the future. But then, he turned to me. "Elizabeth," he said, his tone smooth. "As we talk about these initiatives, I think it's important to note that Elizabeth here has been working directly with some of the country's leading experts in sustainable food systems. She's been instrumental in designing the kind of strategies that will not only improve their bottom line but change how they think about corporate responsibility. Elizabeth, why don't you share some of your insights with us?" I wasn't ready. But I was, at the same time. I had been preparing for years, decades, really, without realizing it. This wasn't just a pitch. This was my life's work, my passion. It was everything I had kept hidden behind the kitchen counter, behind the apron, behind the family who had never given me the space to grow. I stood up, forcing myself to look confident. My voice, when I spoke, didn't tremble. "Thank you, Julian." I turned to the group. "For too long, we've let companies like yours passively consume resources without thinking about the long-term consequences. But what if we could change that? What if your company led the way, not just by sustainable practices, but by redefining what corporate responsibility means. As I spoke, I could see the executives leaning in. Their faces shifted from skeptical to interested, then to impressed. The same faces that had once dismissed me now saw me for what I truly was, a woman with expertise, with value, and with a vision they hadn't expected. But it wasn't just about them. It was about me. I had taken control. I was no longer waiting for them to throw me a bone. I had entered their world and demanded to be seen on my own terms. As the meeting wrapped up, I could feel the shift. When we stood to leave, Gregory approached me, his expression one of reluctant admiration. "Elizabeth, that was impressive. We could definitely use your expertise in this project." I nodded, not sure whether I should feel victorious or nervous. But I didn't need his approval anymore. The meeting was over, but the battle had only just begun. Later that night, Julian called me. "You did it, Elizabeth," he said, his voice full of pride. "They're starting to realize who you are. They can't ignore you now." I didn't reply at first. The weight of the day was heavy, and I felt both exhilarated and exhausted. But then, I realized something. I was done playing by their rules. This wasn't just about being seen anymore. This was about taking back what had always been mine, my worth, my value, my place in this world. "Thank you, Julian," I finally said. "I'm not going back to who I was before. Not after this." He chuckled softly. "You wouldn't even know how to, would you?" And in that moment, I realized he was right. I had already stepped into a new world, one where I didn't have to fight for scraps anymore. I had created a seat at the table, and I wasn't going anywhere. But with this victory came a question that still lingered. What would my family do when they saw what I had become? Would they fight me? Or would they finally accept me as I was? What would you do if you were in my shoes? How far would you go to make sure people finally saw your worth? Like this video if you've ever fought to make yourself seen, and comment below with how you would have handled this situation. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of empowerment and the price of taking control. The days following that meeting were a blur of activity. I had finally stepped into the world my family had always wanted for me, but it didn't feel like a victory. Instead, it felt like the start of a long, bitter reckoning. The kind of reckoning where there's no turning back. I thought the hardest part was behind me, the confrontation with my family, the proving of my worth. But that was just the beginning. What came next was the realization that revenge, in its purest form, is a double-edged sword. Once you take the first step toward forcing people to see you, you can't predict how they'll react. And sometimes, you have to live with the consequences of showing them your power. It started with a text from Victoria. The message was short, to the point, but I could feel the coldness behind every word. "We need to talk," it read. I stared at it, feeling a tight knot in my chest. I knew what was coming. I had forced my way into a world where I was never supposed to belong, and now my sister was going to come for me. She wouldn't let me take her place, not without a fight. Julian, sensing my tension, called that evening. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with concern. "I got a message from Victoria," I said, my fingers tightening around the phone. "She wants to talk." There was a pause on the other end, and then Julian spoke, his tone softer now. "She's not going to like it, Elizabeth. But you can't back down now. You've made your choice, and you have to stick with it." His words were a reminder that this wasn't just about revenge, it was about taking back my life. And once you've stepped out of the shadows, you can't go back. The next morning, I arrived at Victoria's house for our talk. The air between us was thick with tension, but I refused to let her see my nerves. This was my moment. I wasn't going to be the sister in the background anymore. I wasn't going to apologize for making my own way. When she opened the door, her face was a mask of polite discomfort. "Elizabeth," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "Thanks for coming." I nodded, walking past her into the living room, where we sat in uncomfortable silence. "So, what's this all about?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. Victoria took a deep breath before speaking. I've been thinking about everything that's happened over the past few months, since the wedding, and especially since that meeting you had with Gregory's team. I didn't speak, but I could feel the words hanging in the air. She was trying to control the narrative, trying to make me feel like I had overstepped. You've gone too far, Elizabeth, she finally said, her voice low, almost pleading. I'm happy for you, really, I am, but this whole thing with Julian, this pushing into my world like you belong, it's too much. You've got to stop. You're threatening everything I've built. I stared at her, feeling the anger I had buried for so long rise up. She wasn't upset because she cared about me. She was upset because I had shown her up. I had stepped into her perfect life and demanded to be seen. I had taken her place at the table, and she couldn't stand it. Victoria, you never cared about me, I said, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I had held back for years. You cared about keeping me in my place. You never wanted me to succeed unless it fit into your idea of what success looked like. You've always treated me like I was invisible, like I was just some distant sister who wasn't worth your time. She flinched, the truth of my words landing harder than she expected. Elizabeth, don't do this. Please. I'm your sister. I didn't want you to feel left out, but, her voice wavered, and I could hear the desperation creeping in. She was losing control of the situation, and it was bitterly satisfying. No, you didn't want me to feel left out, you wanted to keep me small. You wanted to keep me in a box where you could be the one to shine. You were never going to let me outshine you. You never thought I had the ability, the talent, the drive, to make something of myself. So you shoved me aside. She didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The truth had been laid bare, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to apologize for who I was. The silence between us was thick, but it was the kind of silence that happens when both parties finally understand each other, even if it's in the most painful way possible. Victoria had spent her whole life trying to prove she was better than me. And now, I was showing her that I was better, not because I wanted to be, but because I was. I'm not sorry, Victoria, I said, the words tasting like freedom. I'm not sorry that I made my own way. I'm not sorry that I stepped into your world and forced you to see me. And I'm not sorry for who I've become. Her eyes flickered with a mix of anger, disbelief, and something else, something I couldn't quite place. Regret. I don't want this to come between us, she said, her voice quieter now. But you can't keep doing this. You can't keep pushing me. Then maybe you shouldn't have left me behind in the first place, I said, standing up to leave. You've already pushed me out of your life. Don't act like I'm the one who's been unfair. As I walked out, I could feel her eyes on my back. She had never expected me to stand up to her. She had never expected me to take my place, but I had. And nothing could take that away from me. Later that evening, I sat with Julian, recounting the conversation. He listened carefully, his eyes filled with pride. You did the right thing, he said, his voice firm. You took control, Elizabeth. And you'll never have to ask for their approval again. But as I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder, was this really revenge? Or was it just me finally showing the world who I truly was? What do you think? Was I wrong for fighting back? Is it revenge if you're finally standing up for yourself? It wasn't until the weeks following that conversation with Victoria that I realized the full weight of what I had set in motion. In the beginning, it had felt like I was simply stepping into the light after years of being overshadowed. But with that newfound visibility came consequences, some I was prepared for, and others, I had never even considered. The first crack appeared in the form of a phone call from my mother. Her voice was cool, controlled, but I could sense the tension beneath her words. Elizabeth, we need to talk. I hadn't heard from her since the barbecue. She had done what she always did, pretended nothing had changed, but I could feel the shift in the air, and it wasn't just because of Victoria. It was because, for the first time, I was stepping into the family narrative as someone who had power. And power, as I was quickly learning, changes everything. I agreed to meet her at her house, the place I had spent so many years trying to fit into, trying to be accepted by. The house that had always been a symbol of her expectations, the perfect home, the perfect life, the perfect family. When I arrived, she was already waiting, dressed in one of her impeccable outfits, a subtle mask of composure. But I could see the tension in her eyes, the way her fingers gripped the edge of her coffee cup as she waited for me to speak. "You've caused a stir, Elizabeth," she said, her voice as sharp as I remembered it. "You've changed things." "I'm sorry, Mother," I replied, my tone level but firm. "I'm not sorry for being seen anymore." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she glanced at me, like she was trying to find something she recognized in me, something that fit her expectations of what a daughter should be. "I didn't raise you to be so reckless," she said after a moment, her voice betraying a hint of frustration. "What you're doing isn't just about you, Elizabeth. You're making things uncomfortable for all of us." "Uncomfortable for who, exactly?" I asked, my pulse quickening. "You, Victoria, or me? Because I'm done trying to make myself smaller for your comfort. I've been invisible for too long." Her gaze faltered, and for the first time in years, I saw a crack in her armor. It was brief, but it was there. "I just want what's best for you," she said quietly. "You're playing with fire." I could see what she was doing, trying to manipulate me, trying to pull me back into her web of expectations. But I wasn't the same Elizabeth who had once craved her approval. "I don't need you to protect me anymore," I said, my voice growing stronger. "I need you to see me. And if you can't do that, then I'm not going to keep playing the game." She didn't respond. Instead, she looked away, out the window, and for a moment, I thought maybe she was finally beginning to understand. But then she turned back to me, her mask firmly back in place. "I just don't want this to tear us apart," she said, her voice quieter now. "You and Victoria, you're all I have left." I shook my head, the weight of her words pressing on me. "You've always wanted me to be something I'm not, Mom. You've always wanted me to fit into your picture of what a perfect daughter should be. And I've spent my life chasing that, trying to be enough for you. But I'm done pretending. I'm done fitting into your narrative." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother stared at me, her eyes hard and unreadable, but I didn't flinch. I had done the hardest thing I'd ever done in my life. I had stood up for myself. I didn't wait for her to speak again. I turned and walked out, leaving her to contemplate the mess I had made. The mess we had both created. Later that evening, my phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "We need to talk. I don't want things to be this way between us." That I stared at the screen for a moment, weighing the decision in my mind. I had already made my peace with the idea that nothing would ever be the same again, that whatever I had hoped for from her, whatever bond one had dreamed of, had long since been broken. But there was still a part of me that wondered if we could somehow rebuild it. Could she ever see me as someone worthy of respect? Could I ever stop being the shadow of the sister I had always tried to compete with? I responded. "I'm not the one who's made this happen, Victoria. You've treated me like I don't matter for so long, and I've let it slide. But I'm done pretending that everything's okay." She responded almost immediately. "So you're really doing this? You're really going to destroy everything between us over this?" I shook my head. "Destroy? No, I wasn't destroying anything. I was finally building." "I'm not destroying anything," I typed back. "I'm finally allowing myself to be seen for who I am. If that's too much for you to handle, I understand. But I won't keep hiding for your comfort." I hit send, then stared at the screen, waiting for her response. It didn't come. The next few days were filled with silence. The kind of silence that cuts deeper than words ever could. My mother didn't reach out. Victoria didn't reply. It felt like they were both waiting for me to give in, to apologize for having the audacity to take control of my own life. But I wasn't going to. Not anymore. Then, a week later, I received a call from Julian. His voice, when he spoke, sounded both relieved and concerned. "You're playing a dangerous game, Elizabeth," he said. But I think you're winning. Winning. But at what cost? What would my family say when they realized they couldn't control me anymore? What would they do when they saw that I had no intention of going back to being the sister who stayed in the shadows? They didn't see me now. But they would. And I was going to make sure of that. What would you do if you were in my shoes? How far would you go to finally be seen, to finally be heard by the people who've always ignored you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The days stretched on, filled with tension and uncertainty. Julian's words echoed in my head, and I found myself questioning whether the game I was playing was worth the cost. I had been the one ignored for so long, the one who had been passed over. But now, I was the one pulling the strings. My family, my mother, Victoria, had no idea what to do with the new version of me. The version who no longer needed their validation, who no longer accepted being overlooked and forgotten. But the question loomed in the back of my mind, growing darker with each passing day. Was I really ready for what came next? I couldn't shake the thought of my family's reaction, especially Victoria's. The last time we had spoken, I had made it clear that I wasn't going to play by her rules anymore. But I had also made it clear that I wasn't going to settle for scraps. I was going to take my place in this world, whether she liked it or not. A week passed, and I heard nothing. The silence was suffocating, as if my entire existence had been reduced to an uncomfortable pause. And then, one afternoon, I received a call from an unknown number. The voice on the other end was unmistakable. It was Victoria. "Elizabeth," she said, her voice tight but controlled. "We need to talk. Face to face." My heart skipped a beat, but I kept my voice steady. "What's there left to say, Victoria?" There was a pause, long enough for me to wonder if she was going to back out. But then she spoke again, her tone softer. "I think it's time we have a real conversation about what's been happening between us." I could feel the weight of her words, heavy with something I couldn't place. Was this an apology? Or was this just another attempt to control the narrative? "I'm listening," I said, keeping my voice calm but resolute. I wasn't going to let her twist this into something that was my fault. I wasn't going to be the one who caved. "I'll meet you at the park," she said. "Same place we used to go when we were kids." It's time we finally talked this out. The moment she hung up, I felt a cold sense of anticipation wash over me. I had already made peace with the fact that this conversation wasn't going to go the way I wanted it to. This wasn't going to be a heart-to-heart reconciliation. It was going to be another battle. Another test of strength. But this time, I wasn't afraid of losing. When I arrived at the park, I saw her standing near the old bench we used to sit on. She looked like she had aged a year in the few weeks since our last confrontation. There was a guardedness about her, something that told me she wasn't prepared for what was coming. "Elizabeth," she said quietly as I walked toward her. Her face was neutral, but her eyes gave away the uncertainty she felt. "Victoria," I replied, keeping my distance. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew it was going to be uncomfortable. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt suffocating, the weight of years of resentment hanging thick in the air. Finally, she spoke. "I've been thinking about everything, Elizabeth. About what you said. And I realized, maybe I've been wrong. I've been so focused on being perfect, on maintaining control, that I didn't stop to think about how I've treated you." My breath caught in my throat. Was she apologizing? But even as I felt a flicker of hope, I held it back. She had done this before, apologized just enough to make herself feel better, only to go back to her old ways. I wasn't about to let her off the hook so easily. "So, what now?" I asked, my voice steady but cold. "What exactly are you apologizing for? Is it because I called you out on how you've treated me, or is it because you're realizing that your little perfect world is falling apart?" She flinched, the truth of my words hitting her harder than she expected. I don't know. I guess I thought I could control everything. Even you. But I see now that I can't. You never thought I was good enough for you, Victoria. Not for the family. Not for anyone. I've spent my whole life fighting to be seen, and you've never let me have that. Every time I tried to be something more, you shoved me aside. You let me be invisible. Her eyes dropped, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of regret in her gaze. It was fleeting, but it was there. I didn't mean to hurt you, Elizabeth. I was just so caught up in my own world that I didn't see how much you were hurting. But you still did it, I said, my voice cracking slightly despite my best efforts to remain composed. You still made me feel like I didn't matter. You still kept me on the outside, kept me in the shadows. And now, you want to pretend like everything's fine? I don't know how to fix it, she admitted, her voice trembling. I don't know how to make it right between us. I've messed up. I've hurt you. And I can't change that. Then why are we even having this conversation? I asked, the frustration rising in my chest. If you can't change it, if you can't admit that what you've done is unforgivable, then what's the point? She reached for my arm, but I pulled back. Elizabeth, please. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to lose my sister. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a second, I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that this was real, that she really did want to change, to make things right. But then, I remembered all the times she had said the same thing, only to turn around and do it all over again. I wasn't going to let myself be fooled this time. You've already lost me, Victoria, I said quietly, the weight of my words settling between us. Not because I don't love you, but because I've spent my whole life loving you more than you've loved me. I've spent my whole life letting you control me, letting you dictate who I was supposed to be. And I'm done. I'm done playing the game. Her eyes filled with unshed tears, but I didn't back down. I've had to fight my whole life to prove that I matter. And I won't apologize for finally taking what's mine. You don't get to decide who I am anymore. She didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, it was with a quiet resignation. I see that now. I can't undo what I've done. But I don't want us to be enemies. I just want to stop pretending. I'm done pretending, too, I said, turning away. But I'm not going back to who I was. Not for you, not for anyone. As I walked away from her that day, I realized something crucial. I wasn't the one who had lost anything. Victoria had. She had lost the sister who was once willing to follow her, to be part of her perfect world. But that world wasn't mine anymore. And as I stepped into my new life, I knew I would never again be the person they expected me to be. I wasn't the invisible sister. I wasn't the girl who would stand behind the pillar and wait for approval. I was finally free. What about you? Would you ever be able to forgive someone who had hurt you so deeply, even if they finally admitted their mistakes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of redemption, power, and taking control. This concludes Elizabeth's journey, but the consequences of her decisions will echo in her family forever.